Next is the Science and Education segment with Barbara Brabetz, your host. And Barbara will be visiting with Dr. Edward Standard. Dr. Standard is from Cobleskill College. This will be part 2 of her interview with Dr. Standard, and they'll be talking again about what's going on in the heavens. This will be a heavenly interview. Let's watch.
Welcome to the Science and Education segment on Impact. I'm Barbara Brabetz, back for an encore performance as Dr. Ed Standard with part 2 of What's Up in the Sky. If we can keep this from being a comedy routine and we can get through this without cracking up, we'll be in good shape. Dr. Standard, welcome back to the show.
I'm really, really glad to be here.
I'm sure you are. We talked last time about the sun and how the sun and the earth essentially were interrelated. Obviously they are interrelated, but rather how the sun's activity influences processes here on Earth.
Yep.
Let's take it a notch back from there. Let's talk about stuff outside of our solar system.
We have to?
We do.
Can we talk about the solar system first?
Why don't we do that? We ended last time talking about the transit of Venus across the sun.
Right.
So we had a sun, and then we had a dot go across the sun, and
Right.
we could measure, of course, some things we could find out, or ancient peoples could find out about Venus. First, that it was round.
Right.
Second, how far away it was from the Earth.
Right.
Third, anything else?
Effectively, by knowing that measurement, we can figure out the size of the solar system.
Oh, because then if we knew where Venus was and we knew how the other planets tracked,
Right.
we could figure out who was who and how far away they were.
Exactly.
Great. So that really was key to the concept of a solar system where Earth is one of many planets surrounding a sun.
Right. And it only happens every 107 years or so. It happens twice in a 12-year period or 11-year period, and then it's every 107 years it happens. So it's something that if you missed it this time, then you'll have to catch the reruns.
Yes, or at least see the video on YouTube. I'm sure
And
NASA's put it there.
The reason it doesn't happen very often is that while the planets are all in a plane, they all lie in what's called the ecliptic plane around the sun, they're not quite on it. They're a little bit below, a little bit above. So it's only every once in a while when the Earth and Venus and the sun are all on the same plane that Venus crosses it. I mean, Venus crosses it all the time, but we only see it from Earth when the three of them are in the same plane.
Are any of the other planets, like for example Mercury, which is another inner planet, can we see it track across the sun?
Mercury also does as well. Not very often. And it's very small compared to Venus. It's about 1/3 the size, and it's a lot closer as well to the sun than to us. So it's quite small when it goes across, but Venus does transit as well.
So we're on the third planet from the sun.
As I understand it.
That's what they tell me. If we go to Mars or Jupiter, say, then we would have the opportunity of seeing more transits because, of course, there are more planets between the sun and that planet.
That's right.
So,
Although at the same time, the sun would be a lot smaller, and therefore the chances of the planets going across would be less likely as well.
Oh, that's right. So you've got that perceptive problem of it's further away,
Yeah.
and therefore it appears smaller. Just
Right.
like why the goalie stands in the front
Right.
of the soccer goal is to appear larger.
Right.
And therefore intimidate the opponent into
And
not
that's
kicking
important.
the ball.
Because the further away you are from the sun, the less likely you are to see a transit, because you're less likely to be exactly in that plane that would contain this really, really minute sun. And that becomes important when you talk about extrasolar planets.
Now explain what extrasolar planets, it sounds like, I don't know, like you're getting something extra, but really what does it refer to?
Extra in this case means outside of the norm. So an extrasolar planet is a solar that's outside, is a planet outside of our solar system.
So Sol, the name of our sun, has its 9 or 8 satellites, depending on how you count it these days.
Right.
So some other sun somewhere, if it has planets, they would be transiting across as well.
Every once in a while, but very often they wouldn't transit. And so what we've done, for example, there's a lot of ways of discovering extrasolar planets, but what we've done for those kind of transits, the eclipsing transits, is we have sent up a satellite called the Kepler satellite. And Kepler only keeps track of a very, very small part of the sky. There's about 1,000 stars in this one area, little square of the sky, and it stays on there all the time, and it watches the light coming from suns to see when a particular sun becomes just a little bit dimmer because a planet goes over the front of it.
So if you think of our sun as a glowing ball of gases,
Right?
it has kind of a, I don't know, like a light bulb intensity, like a rating, like a wattage
Right?
or lumens.
Right.
So it doesn't really get
They don't get
more
bigger.
brilliant and less brilliant.
Generally speaking, they don't. There are stars out there that pulse.
Pulsars.
Well, these are not pulsars, they're called variable stars.
Okay.
And what the variable star does is it gets bigger and smaller, and as it does, it gets brighter and dimmer. But that brightness and dimness is on the order of days or weeks or sometimes months. And it's very consistent. While a planet going in front happens only every once in a while, and it doesn't happen again. So you're looking for those singular events that occur just every once in a while. We have probably about 200 or 300 possible planets out there. But they have to do it more than once to be able to say that's actually a planet. Because you have to get it to go around the sun completely and then come back again. And then you know its orbit.
So let's back up. It's been about only a decade that we've had the technology with the Kepler satellite up there to really stare into
year.
space. A
Year and a
year?
Yeah, we have other ways of doing it.
Okay.
For example, originally we determined that there were planets or not planets by what's called Doppler shift.
Okay.
And I brought my Doppler shift device here.
You're going to
There it
pretend
is.
you're a planet right here?
I'm going to convince myself that I'm a planet up here. There we are. And over here is the sun.
Okay, let's see.
Okay? And what most people think is that when a planet goes around the sun doesn't move. But actually that's not true. What happens is they balance. And where the sun and the weight of the planet and the weight of the sun balance, that's the point that they rotate around.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if I stick this little stick in here, like this, and I rotate, this guy here rotates around, but also this one does. So as the planet goes around, the sun goes around as well. And you can see that wobble, because you can see the light from that sun suddenly changes a little bit, much the same way that a NASCAR car going by you changes sound, the light changes. So as it's coming towards you.
So this one has a tinier orbit.
Yes.
Compared to
this
this
has a
one.
little tiny orbit. This one has a bigger orbit. Okay? And basically that's how it works. Now, the idea is this. As that sun goes around, as it moves away from you, the light shifts a little bit. It gets a little bit bluer, or a little bit redder. And as it gets towards you, it gets a little bit bluer. And you can see that change.
So depending on where we sit in
Right.
our solar system and in our universe,
Right.
if we're looking at another sun,
Mhm.
it's going to wobble towards us
And
and
away
away
from
from
us.
us.
And as it wobbles towards us and away from us, its light changes a little bit, and we see that shift. It's called a red shift or a blue shift. And what we've discovered is that by using that, we can find planets. But all the planets we've found so far are huge, and they're right near the sun that they're around.
Because
Guess why?
big wobble.
They're big, there's a big wobble. Because the bigger it is, the more wobble there is. But why are they all close to the sun?
Oh gosh, I don't know why.
Because they go faster around the sun.
So you got a
Mercury-
big
Big
wobble.
That's fast.
That's fast.
The last thing anybody wants to do is sit there watching a sun wobble for 10 years.
Ugh.
It's boring. So you want to find big planets that are right near the sun. So when they talk about extrasolar planets, they always say it's the size of Jupiter in the orbit of Mercury. Well, the reason it's the size of Jupiter in the orbit of Mercury is the only one we can find that way. So for years, that was the only way we could find planets.
And really, this phenomenon of finding extrasolar planets, even by Doppler shift, is relatively new.
10 to 12 years maximum. So we can discover planets by Doppler shift. We can discover planets by them passing in front of the sun. Which one do you think is more common?
I would think the passing in front of the sun is more common because all of your planets are going to pass in front of the sun at one point in time. We would just need to be at the right
We
angle.
have to be at the right place, and there is the problem. So there's probably billions of planets out there with billions of suns, with planets going around them, but they're not on the same line as us, so we don't see them go across the sun.
Right. So if you and I are in the same plane, if
Right.
we're one up here, we're not going to
see
see
it.
any transits whatsoever.
That's right.
We
And
just have to be lucky.
So if you want to find giant planets close to the sun, then you use Doppler shift. If you want to find Earth-sized planets that are further from the sun, you have to use this transit method. and the transit method is very, very difficult, and it's very rare. So we don't really know how many planets there are out there, and we haven't found very many planets. I think last year we found one planet that was Earth size in the proper comfort zone where the water wouldn't be boiling off or freezing.
Oh, the so-called M-class planet, the one where we think the conditions would be okay for life. I mean, now we're getting kind of into the science fiction-y part of it all, but really we're trying to look for Earth-like planets.
Right, and we actually have giant radio telescopes pointing towards that planet right now to see if we can catch the reruns of Gilligan's Island when they come through.
Of all the things that they would have captured from us, I hope it wouldn't be Gilligan's Island. Maybe it'll be Impact. So who does this research?
There's a number of groups. Well, the extraterrestrial research is done by SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, SETI, and they've been around for years. In fact, there's people who have screensavers on their computers that download stuff from SETI and analyze it.
So when their computers are dormant, they go get a cup of coffee or they go to lunch. Their computer then starts churning, looking at images and trying to
figure out what's
glean these Jupiter-sized planets?
Well, they're trying to find signals from those planets that suggest that Gilligan's Island may be coming through. We had one just recently that said wow. It translated to wow. And so we're trying to figure out whether there's somebody over there who told us wow, but so far we haven't figured out who it was or whether it actually happened.
That's kind of scary that the first contact would be
wow,
would be an exclamation of wow.
So. Yeah, there's back in the 60s there was a suggestion that there actually were extrasolar planets out there when they discovered pulsars. And a pulsar beeps. And so you're looking at this area in space with a radio telescope and you hear beep, 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 and you're thinking, oh, this is really cool, they're sending out Morse code. And when it was first discovered, the New York Times published a big article saying we'd finally been contacted by extraterrestrials. But it turns out in that case, what it probably was a very, very small star called a neutron star, which is sending out radio waves. And when it hits us, it rotates, and when it hits us, we get the beep.
So in our last show, you said that our sun puts out all kinds of different light, which includes radio waves, microwaves, cosmic rays. So this particular type of neutron star just does it very regularly, and we interpreted that.
It does it only in two directions, parallel to the north and south pole, because it's got a very, very strong magnetic field, and it sends it out just like a solar flare does, but only in two directions. So as it's rotating, when it hits the Earth, we hear it. So it goes beep, beep, beep.
Kind of like a sprinkler hitting the side of a house.
Yeah, or like a lighthouse. Same sort of thing. Now, that beep can change frequency as well if the planet or if the sun around it is wobbling. So we actually, the first planet we discovered outside of our solar system was looking at a pulsar that was going beep, 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 beep. It was changing frequency as it was wobbling.
Oh, there's that wobble again.
Yeah, so you get it both ways.
Now the Kepler telescope, which you mentioned earlier, is very kind of focused. That's the right word. On one area of the sky.
That's right.
Is that area of the sky within our plane? Did we pick it because the best chances of Earth-like planets would be there?
It wouldn't make any difference because the plane that the planets are on, that we're going around the sun, is just at one of a billion different planes. So there's no way to look at something that's right on our plane and say that that's going to happen. It just means the sun will be in the way. Generally speaking, the ones that we look at are out of our plane, so we don't have the sun to worry about. And in those cases, we're just looking at this little area, but it's important because it's a planetary nursery. It has a lot of young suns, and young suns are ones that would be more than likely to have planets still around them that wouldn't have blown up or done other things to destroy what's on them.
And by being a planetary nursery, being far away, we're really looking back in time. So are we looking back to find planets that are like what Earth used to be like, or are we looking for planets that are like Earth now?
Depends on how long the planet's been around for. I mean, there's a chance, there's a very good chance that they may not be actually seeing reruns of Gilligan's Island. It could be the first time run for them.
Yeah, could be.
So it's, it's all a matter of perspective, I guess.
But how do we look back in time when we go and look at a sun?
Well, light moves at 186,000 miles a second. Light coming from the sun takes 8 minutes to get to us, like I said on the last show, last week. Therefore, the light that we're getting on the Earth is 8 minutes old. So we're seeing the sun as it was 8 minutes ago.
So when we look up in the sky and that thing we see, the big yellow ball,
Right, it's
it's already gone.
Right,
So say it were to supernova many, many billions of years from now.
let's hope.
We won't know until 8
8
minutes
minutes
later. So what do you think's next on this discovery of other solar systems and other stars? What are we going to find next?
It's a very good question. My guess is that we're going to be able to, we started off being able to see wobbles that were very, very, very wide because we didn't have the ability to see anything smaller. Now we can see suns that are wobbling at about 3 miles an hour, 5 miles an hour, which is very small. My guess is that we'll get smaller and smaller, so we'll be able to see extremely fine wobbles, and that will tell us by looking at how the wobbles occur, how many planets there are, and how fast they go around the sun.
Right, because we were only talking about one planet and how
Right.
it influences the wobble with your diagram.
Right.
But you put 5 or 6 of them, it's going to wobble a little bit because of this one and a little bit because of this one,
Right.
and you get very complex
so you start getting
wobbles.
solar systems
Yeah.
and seeing how the solar system interacts with each other.
Boy, it
That
makes
gets
the
interesting.
vectors in my brain go a little nuts.
I don't have any vectors left.
Thank God for computers.
Hmm.
Ed, if that happens, will you come back and we'll talk more about extrasolar planets at that time?
If I'm still alive, sure.
Okay, deal.
Okay. And of course, if our viewers are still alive as well.
And if the show is still alive.
Exactly.
Well, Dr. Ed Stander, thanks for doing the yeoman's work today, trying to relay all that complex stuff and get it down and digestible and out there for our viewers to understand.
And
So,
they can always watch this 5 or 6 times if they miss it the first time. So
okay.
It's okay.
We'll post
And
a
if they miss
quiz.
it- if they miss it, right, the first 5 times, they can go out into space and catch it first time.
Or
through
8
as it
minutes
hits.
later
That's right.
on the sun.
On the sun.
There you go.
Superb.
Wonderful. Well, thanks again.
It's a pleasure.
You've been watching the Science and Education segment on Impact. I'm Barbara Brabetz with my guest Ed Stander. Thanks for watching.
Proctors, bringing the best in arts, education, and entertainment.